So have you ever wanted to subdivide a property? Well, if so, you are a rare bird because most people could just care less. However, if you're into real estate investing, subdividing a property can be a fantastic way to add value to it. So let's talk subdividing. So if you like real estate and want to learn more about increasing the value of your property, please consider giving this video a like and subscribe if you want more videos from me on wealth building and real estate development. So let's start by asking ourselves, why would you want to subdivide a property? What if you've got 10 acres and you just want to cut off a little piece of it and sell it to your friend? Well, you can't really do that legally. In order to transfer title, the land has to meet certain requirements. So it has to be properly defined. It has to have a survey. It has to be metered and measured. All of the easements need to be on that property. It has to meet certain criteria for both the city and the county. So you can't just go off and sell an arbitrary piece of land. That piece of land has to be defined with a set of metadata that satisfies the state and a title company. Because if you're going to transfer title of a piece of property, it has to meet all of those definitions. And a title company won't close, or at least shouldn't close, on a piece of property unless it is properly defined. So the process of subdividing is ultimately the process of defining smaller pieces of property out of one larger piece of property. Subdividing can be tricky business for developers because developers are entrepreneurs and they're excited and they want to get paid for subdividing property as soon as they can. So they might do things like take a deposit on a piece of land before the subdivision is complete. You got to be really careful here. It's possible to do this in a legal way. You can take a deposit and keep it in escrow and not transfer the title until the subdivision is complete. But ultimately, you don't want to take possession of property or sell a piece of property until it is properly subdivided, has its own tax ID, and is legit with a title company. Now, this is one particular case where title insurance is extra important because that title insurance ensures that you own that specific piece of property. So a title company is not going to write a policy on a piece of land if it's not properly papered up. They're not going to transfer title on something that is half subdivided. Now, there are some other ways to kind of get around this by making condo associations where you own a piece of the property under a giant condo regime that defines little pieces as percentage of the property. And that's a slightly different strategy and more complicated, and I'm not really going to talk about that. So today we're just going to cover what it takes to legally subdivide a piece of property into 2 or more legal lots. All right, so you've set your sights on doing this. What's next? Well, I'm going to speak from my experience here, at least in Austin, Texas. And here you have to deal with really 2 municipalities, 2 key ones. That's the county and the city. If you're outside of the city, you just have to deal with the county. If you're inside the city, you may have to deal with the city and the county and some other entities that we'll talk about here in a minute. So depending on where you are, that may be different. But ultimately, those are the 2 municipalities you're probably going to have to go through, which is your city and your county, and then what other utilities are attached to those areas. The most critical piece of this endeavor is having a good civil engineer, because your civil engineer is going to have to submit the subdivision. They're going to have all the connections with the city. They're going to know all of the requirements on a technical level that you don't know in order to implement your subdivision. So before you get started anywhere else, find a good civil engineer. I'm going to go over no less than 13 things that you need to consider when subdividing a property. Now, when you talk to your civil engineer, they're going to have a list that's a lot longer than that. And some of these items could be subdivided into even smaller items. But these 13 I consider the high-level starter items that you want to think about when you go to subdivide a property. The first thing is a survey, and you can't get away with just a regular survey. You're going to need a full tree and topo survey, and that means where every tree is, whether protected or not, although mostly you're concerned about the protected trees, the full lay of the land and how it drains, because water drainage is going to be important. And you get to pay for not only one survey, but 2 surveys, the one before you subdivide and the one after you subdivide. The second thing you need to consider is your proposed subdivision. Where are these lines going to go? Do they fit? Are the lots large enough? Is there access? So now you have to decide, hey, can I put this line here? Does it cross something that's illegal? Do I have enough space to put what you reasonably want to build? You've got to have in your mind what the purpose of the subdivision is. Why are you making the lots the size that they are? And what are you going to use each lot for? The third thing is maintaining minimum lot sizes and frontage and land locks. So what that means is you can't make lots too skinny, because if they're so skinny, you might have problems getting driveways, or there might be a minimum distance for a driveway from one piece of land to the next, depending on how busy the road is. You also can't leave land landlocked, meaning let's say that you can get to a property from a road and you cut it in half. Well, there's no way to get to that back property because there's no road access. So you've really got to spend a lot of Jenga time figuring out where the land's going to go, how it's cut, and making sure that you meet all of your minimum lot size requirements. Depending on the municipality, you may have a minimum lot size that you can't get any smaller than. So again, it's going to depend on your area, but you'll need to work with your civil engineer to figure out, hey, what does each piece look like, and am I meeting all of my minimum requirements according to my local laws? The fourth is maintaining utility easements. It doesn't take very long to run into one, and they're everywhere. There's power, water, sewer, gas, runs all over the place. And so you'll need to make sure that if you have a utility easement on the larger piece of land before you subdivide it, that you leave enough room for the utility to maintain that line. So you have to make sure that that also doesn't make a piece of property that after it's been subdivided unviable or unaccessible because that easement is now taking up a portion of that property that just makes it unusable. The fifth one is the floodplain and drainage. So anytime you subdivide, at least here in Austin, Texas, you have to create a drainage pond or a retention system. So you may have to have a storm drain hookup, which isn't necessarily in every location. So depending on how the topography of the land goes, you may have to create a drainage pond on one of the lots that you subdivide. So again, you'll have to work with your civil engineer to figure out where's the water going to go. And also depending on what you put on the property, that's going to create more drainage. So this is probably one of the stickiest items that I've had to deal with, is just figuring out how to manage water after you subdivide. The sixth one is detention ponds. Now this is related to the last one in drainage, but the size and shape of that pond can be a lot of things. It can be big and shallow, or it can be small and deep. Sometimes it will have concrete retention walls and sometimes it won't. So depending on what you're trying to achieve, the size and the design of the detention pond will impact what you can do with the final property. So again, I keep saying this, civil engineer is going to help you manage and design the detention pond for what you want to achieve. Okay, number 7 is watershed issues. And so here in Austin, Texas, there are a lot of aquifers and streams all around the county. And so the requirements for what you can build in one piece of property may change if you are near a stream or on top of an aquifer. So on face value, you might look at a property and think, wow, this thing's 5 acres. I can split that into 2.5 acre lots and then develop them separately. Well, not so fast. If it's on a watershed, then they might have a restriction that says, well, you can only have one house on those 5 acres because you are on top of an aquifer or too close to a stream. So you want to make sure that you check those before you purchase, because if you end up buying the property and find out after the fact, well, sorry, you didn't do your homework. The 8th thing is the fire department. So it turns out the fire department is really invested in getting to every house and being able to put out a potential fire. And a lot of this has to do with roadway access, but ultimately you need to make sure that a fire truck can get to any structure that is on that subdivided property. So you'll have to make sure that whatever you design, the fire trucks can get there. Okay, number 9 is a big one, which is utility access. So not only do you have to maintain those easements, you might need new utilities. So how is each lot going to get water, power, sewer? Are you going to do septic tanks? Are you going to hook up to the public sewer? Where's the water going to come from? Do you need to drill a well? So all of those are costs that you're going to need to consider and how much they're going to cost to put those utilities on each new lot. Okay, number 10 is zoning. Is your zoning going to stay the same or is it going to change? Do you want to increase what can be put on there or leave it the same or decrease? So if you go through a zoning change, that's some extra homework with the county or the city. So you got to figure out like, hey, if I'm doing this subdivision thing, I might as well stack the zoning change on top if you want to do that. Now with all of that, and your civil engineer will probably point out that I missed something, you can apply for an application to subdivide at your municipality. Now, it's not just the city's planning and zoning board that's going to have to approve your application. There are other parties that get their fingers in there and want to check the boxes, like the fire department, the water authority, the sewer authority, the electric authority. All of those departments may have a say in whether or not you can do a subdivide. So once you send that into the city, they're going to get comments on your application, and all of those utilities may also need to provide comments before you can have an official package that is ready to be reviewed. Okay, the 12th thing is timing and deadlines. It's not like they review these applications every day. At least here in Austin, they only review them once a month. So you have a day per month where they accept the deadline for applications, and then once you submit them, it may take them 30, 60, or 90 days to give comments on that application and then send it back to your civil engineer. So just when you think you're done, like, nope, now the fight starts. I don't necessarily want to call it a fight, but the back and forth starts with the city on making sure that all of the plans are set and everyone agrees before you move forward. And the last point, the 13th point, which is aptly numbered, is giving your neighbors the opportunity to object to whatever it is that you're doing. So after you spent all that time and money coming up with a subdivision plan, you submit it to the city, you do the back and forth. It's maybe been a year since you started the project because now the municipality has approved your plan and they're ready to approve your subdivision. Now they notify all of the neighbors and have the neighbors come and offer their objections to your plan. So you might want to consider, priming the pump and talking to your neighbors ahead of time to see if your plan is going to cause them some ire. But this is where your plans can fall apart if someone comes and objects to your plan. If this happens, usually they can be managed and you can figure out to come to some arrangement with your neighbors, but this is where the subdivision process can be elongated because someone doesn't like what you're doing. And this is also where most of the danger and risk in subdivision comes from, because it takes so much time and money to get a project all the way to the end, and then a neighbor doesn't like it, and then now you're stuck. So best of luck to you once you get to this stage. Subdivision deals are really risky because that no can kind of come anywhere in that long list of things to do. And so depending on how much money you spend, you could get halfway through the project and then run into something where you just can't work around it. Now, in many cases, you can, but it just means more time. But because time is money, it's ultimately costing you more money because you have to navigate around those problems. This is why once you subdivide a property into a smaller property, the dollar per foot is always higher because there is an intrinsic value in having a properly defined lot. And that's why the returns on this type of project can be really high, because they're so risky and because they take so long and because there's so many opportunities for them to go wrong. This is certainly what I would consider a high-risk strategy, but the more you do them, like anything else, you'll get used to them, you'll get used to the landmines, you'll figure out what makes a property more likely to succeed versus another. And also, again, your partnership with a good civil engineer is absolutely critical in helping you make sure that a project can actually get done. And I'll give you one warning right now. The most expensive and probably the most worrisome thing that I think about when doing these subdivision deals is the dreaded service extension request. And so it's also called an SER. At least here in Austin, they are relatively expensive. I imagine it's similar in the rest of the country, but it's about $1,000 a foot to put in new sewer line. So if you're doing, a mile of new sewer line, that's, $500,000, or it could be even more depending on what you go through. But that cost can usually wreck a project. So you always want to watch out for, hey, do I have to extend utilities? And if you do, who's going to pay for them? Thanks so much for watching. I would love to know your thoughts on subdividing, and if it's as scary to you as it was to me when I first started doing it, may you invest wisely, and we'll see you next time.